Holy deja vu, Tim. A concerned citizen spotted bit-part character actors from the 60s slinking around the old abandoned actors studio.
Great Vito Scotti, Paul, old chum. There's not a second to lose.
To the bat poles!
Welcome to the Bat Poles, a research project into Batman 66. And it's not a three-dog night yet, but Paul's almost there. He's got a second dog. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Yes, how are you? If I sound a little tired, it's because I am. We have a puppy. He is just over 8 weeks old. And he is a Bernedoodle to match our 7-year-old Bernedoodle. Yeah, lovely puppy, gonna be great, calming down, but still we're up at all hours of the night. So I may hallucinate slightly from time to time.
Is this one going to be giant too?
Well, the first was supposed to be a mini, and he wound up being 80 pounds, so that didn't really work out. This one, however, really is supposed to be a mini, and we have seen his mother, so we know that his mother is a poodle, and she's not enormous, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. His feet are not nearly as big as Carter's were when Carter was a little older than this one is now, so the jury's still out.
Okay. So our theme version this time was entitled Batman Earth 66 from Bennie Music, described on its YouTube channel About page as the page of music composer Joseph Bennie, as opposed to some other kind of composer.
Or as opposed to music composer Jack Bennie.
Uploaded to YouTube December 6, 2019. So this version of the theme kind of reminds me of that Photoshop thing going around social media of Batman in a black costume, which I've said burns my eyes. I'm like, why? I don't want to see Adam West in a black costume. I don't
Batman
mind
66
as much.
in a black costume. Got it. Okay.
This I don't mind as much, but it's okay. But yeah, it sounds too, I don't know, Christopher Nolan-y or something.
Yeah, it's like, Hans Zimmer, who never has not an ironic bone in his body, and taken up the Batman 66 Hefti theme.
Yeah, this is a Batman that carries a gun, I think, this version of the theme.
A Batman in aviators firing a bazooka. To quote my favorite song by the band Dry Cleaning these days. So, yeah, it's a little dark. I found myself, I was telling Tim this before we started recording, that it sounds a lot like, it has the kind of flavor of ELO's Fire on High, the instrumental, the melodrama of the orchestral organization, composition. Anyway, so it's okay, but yeah, it's a little dark and not quite that. Whether it comes from the universe of 66 or not is debatable.
Now, I imagine that this is all synthesized, but it sure sounds like you rented a whole orchestra.
Oh, I know. Or else, he's playing every instrument, and it took him 6 months to fold all the tapes together.
All right, so this time we're talking about an early version of the script for King Tut's first appearance. As broadcast, of course, it was the Curse of Tut, but this version is called the Phantom Pharaoh. And this is the script that our patrons chose in a poll. I put up four different scripts that we have on hand, and this was the one that they chose. If you would like to get in on polls to vote for Bat Polls content, you can join us at patreon.com/deconcomics. Just got to get that plug in there. So it turns out that this Phantom Pharaoh script has voluminous notes on it and attributed, explicitly to Lorenzo Semple Jr. And they're very enlightening notes, as we'll get to.
Yep. Very cool to see.
I think they tell us a lot about his ideas about who the characters are in this version of Batman and what they're not, and how they're supposed to talk and how they're not supposed to talk.
Right.
It seems like the writers of this script, Robert C. Dennis and Earl Barret, were kind of struggling to keep the characterizations right. Semple would say some of the lines are right and others are way off.
Mm-hmm. Now, this version of the script is dated revised December 7th, 1965. So, of course, this is before any episodes made it to the air or were sometime in the midst of filming. Mm-hmm. But it's also a revised version of the script. So this is not Semple's first go on it, it seems.
Right. So, yeah, you can see... It says on the front it's a revision. There are some pages that have been replaced. You can see that they have revision in the header, and other pages don't have that. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of tell pages were replaced.
Right. At one point, pages 12, 13, and 14 were replaced and condensed into a single page 12, which then begins the count with the page after that is 15. So those pages are lost to the ages, apparently.
Yeah. And I noticed that on some of the revised pages, some of the shot numbers, it'll just say omit next to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So whoever would have been looking at this script, at least at the kind of intermediate editing stage, would have probably had the original version alongside this one. It's just funny to see omit when we don't have any version of those shots at all.
Omit what? Now, as we've seen in a number of scripts, Part 1 is fairly close to what was broadcast, and Part 2 goes off in a different direction, except that as it goes, it kind of veers a little bit towards what was broadcast in spots. You can see like vaguely similar scenes. So those particular points were just kind of changed somewhat for what was broadcast, and other parts are completely replaced. Right.
And we'll get to that as we move through it.
Also, I should mention, I think I mentioned before, Crispy Critter sent us most of a final version of The Curse of Tut. And there were a few pages missing that I got scanned by the American Heritage Center in Laramie.
Woot woot.
And then I broke down and ordered the intermediate version of the script that Laramie also has. And I don't know, our proctor messed up and scanned the final for me again. So I'm waiting for her to... I pointed out to her, there are two different versions listed here on the site, and I want the other one. So I'm waiting to hear back. But we're probably going to do both of those in our next episode.
Sounds good.
So that this one isn't 3 hours.
And our listeners would say, Tut, no more 3-hour episodes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there would not be many ad-lib alerts for this one.
Certainly not.
Because it seems like, especially just watching the final version of the episode again, Bono is not ad-libbing much in this one. He's playing it much straighter than he did later.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he's more reserved, even restrained.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at the first page, as you mentioned, this is really early that this is being written. Nothing's been broadcast yet. and the show is still sort of taking shape. Semple has this vision for it, and he's trying to communicate it to the other writers. And some parts of his vision are being changed too, right? So early on, we've seen that there were super titles throughout the episodes, and then it became Dozier's narration as Desmond Doomsday. But this script has no Desmond Doomsday. It does have some super titles within the show that he's advising which should be changed to dialogue or just abandoned.
Yeah, at one point, Semple appears to get impatient with the super titles and just says, "We don't do that," or something along those lines.
Okay, so now the opening is similar to what was broadcast, but it starts out focusing on forms of transportation in Gotham City: cars and buses, ferry boat and subway trains, hansom cab, and a truck. And then the truck is the one that has the Sphinx on it. But, I mean, as broadcast, it just focuses on the park, and then here comes the truck, and there's the Sphinx.
Yeah, it's clever. I mean, it's a clever kind of move that the writers make in a couple of... They make similar kinds of moves elsewhere in the script. But Dennis and Barret seem to be trying to sort of segue the viewer gently into the truck by showing us other pieces, other forms of transportation, and then having the truck do the dumping of the Sphinx into Gotham Central Park. It's clever. It's probably more clever than the opening of a Batman episode needs. Really, it just needs to do what we finally wind up with, which is Desmond Doomsday introducing Gotham Central Park, showing us a building or two, and then the park, and then the truck shows up.
Yeah.
Afternoon in Gotham Central Park, noble sanctuary of nature in the midst of the teeming metropolis. Tranquility, peace, quiet. The deceptive quiet of the jungle, where a criminal beast is about to spring.
Dennis and Barret have a visual imagination for narration, which is kind of cool, but it's too much. It's more movie-like than it is television-like, and it's kind of a willingness to take its time and move the viewer continuously into the object of our greatest interest, the narrative interest, which is the truck.
And so the crowd in the park, as written, includes a young, avid rookie cop named O'Toole, who appears in various scenes in this version of the script. And they're really throwing in a lot of Irish cops in the script. And they all have O apostrophe in their last name.
Yes, until we finally get to O. O'Hara. Actually, he's so Irish he's got two O's in front of his surname.
So then this part is basically what was shot. The two men in masks that are clearly Egyptian in origin. I'm feeling like the prop people didn't quite reach clearly Egyptian in origin when they made those masks.
No, it seems like the fact that both the masks and the statue are gold, like spray-painted gold, that's meant to signify Egyptianness, I guess.
And that statue is not really a sphinx either, as I'm sure we mentioned when we did this episode the first time. I'm not sure what it is. I couldn't identify any Egyptian god that looks just like that.
No, it looks more like a jackal, which is obviously a popular figure in ancient Egyptian religious art, but I don't know anything about its significance beyond that.
They must not have just had a sphinx available to use like that.
Right.
Go with what you got, I guess.
Yeah.
They'd already spent too much money, so...
I suppose. Yes, who knows? Maybe they ripped it off of the leftovers from the set of the Ten Commandments. Different studio, though.
So, yeah, the rest of the scene goes basically as what we saw on the screen, with the announcement coming from the Sphinx. I noticed that it's written as, "and all who oppose him shall be smote down dead," and it's changed to "smitten dead" as broadcast.
Yeah, it doesn't sound quite so King James English that way. It was interesting, though. It took me a long time to understand. I had to reread it over and over again. It must have been late at night. On page 2, the stage direction for shot 4B, the truck bed tips to dump its load. The tarp is secured to the sides of the bed so that it remains in place, merely collapsing as the load slides out onto the shrubbery. I have no idea why it was so hard for me to visualize that. But once I saw the show, I thought, they're actually following that shot description pretty rigidly. So, it surprised me how much of the stage direction ends up kind of, being realized on the screen.
Yeah, so, yeah, this scene makes it all the way to the final, basically. Then we're in Gordon's office. Now, Gordon and O'Hara are not quite on top of what's going on here. They're trying to figure it out. And Semple writes right on to decision to call Batman. No museum stage wait. I don't know what I'm not quite sure what he's referring to there. And then Egyptian motif would suggest King Tut, even to Gordon.
So that's a point at which apparently Semple was either overruled or thought better of his comment, because they don't move on past the museum stage. By museum stage, I presume he means O'Hara and Gordon thinking that this must be a publicity stunt put on for the Egyptian exhibit at the museum. Yeah. So they do call Bruce. Bruce's lines are somewhat different in this version, but it's still, his indignancy at being accused of pulling a publicity stunt is expressed differently, but it's the same emotion and the same beat. After which then Gordon and O'Hara decide that it's time to buzz the bat phone.
Also, as written here, a little bit into the scene, O'Hara has a revelation that Egyptian, it's a blind man I've been not to see it. The Gotham City Metropolitan Museum is unveiling a new exhibit of ancient Egyptian antiques today, where, as broadcast, O'Hara just brings it up nonchalantly. Like, I'm sure that this is why. Like, he's already figured it out before the scene starts.
Yes, the one neuron in his brain that, has, detective powers fired, blammo, and there's the idea. Turns out that he's not entirely wrong.
The super title calls Dick Grayson Bruce Wayne's youthful protege. We never heard him called a protege on the show, I don't think.
Yeah, if he's grooming him to be baby Batman or something.
And rather than Bruce, Dick, and Aunt Harriet about to head to the museum, they're entertaining several members of the museum board with tea and biscuits at Wayne Manor. And there's a Mrs. Popham there who shows up again a bit later. So this is all different, and Alfred brings in a phone on a long cord when Gordon calls Bruce Wayne.
Now, the disappearance of Mrs. Popham I relate to the disappearance of O'Toole. In the stage directions, or in the notes actually, from Semple a little bit later, Semple notes that we don't have to have O'Toole in the room with Batman and Robin describing what happened at the park. Yeah, we have his report. So I think Semple is doing what any good script developer / editor needs to be doing, which is sort of figuring out how to reduce speaking parts. So they don't have to pay so many people, union scale. So O'Toole a cop shows up in the opening scene, but he doesn't have any lines. So we don't need him for anything but his report.
Well, as you say that, I'm thinking, if Semple had been editing Stanley Ralph Ross, we might have been spared some of his darlings. because all the extra characters that Ross would throw into the scripts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, by the bushelful.
I'm vacuuming the upstairs bedroom. Anyway.
Yes, it's on page 8 where Semple says, don't need O'Toole, they have his report.
I notice when the call comes from Gordon, as broadcast, Alfred, that exchange about, Bruce says it's for me, Alfred makes it more explicit. Here it just says, he said Mr. Bruce Wayne, where in the show he says,
Police Commissioner Gordon wishes to speak with Mr. Wayne.
With me, Alfred?
Yes, sir. He was most distinct. With Mr. Bruce Wayne.
Excuse me, Aaron.
Because I feel like as it's written here, the audience might not quite get what Bruce means. Not Batman, Bruce Wayne.
Right. And as shot, there's a reaction shot from Dick, too. Although he doesn't say anything, he looks incredulous that Alfred is, talking about Commissioner Gordon calling in front of Aunt Harriet the way that he is. So that adds to the sense of, Alfred needing to make it explicit that it's Bruce Wayne who's being asked for.
Yeah, and so like you said, the exchange between Bruce and Gordon is, Gordon is not actually, we can't hear him here. It's just Bruce's side of the conversation. And then he says, instead of saying, I believe you've taken leave of your wits, goodbye, he says, my dear Commissioner, the museum has exhibits, but never exhibitions. Good day, sir. But he does not say, I said good day. Anyway, so then it says, wipe out, Bruce's segment of screen, which brings in police brass. Gordon hangs up.
That just means that the screenwriters wanted Gordon to be split screen with Bruce. And then
right, it says that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and then the wipe would, eliminate one of the characters and leave the other one.
It's curious that he would ask for a split screen and then not give Gordon any lines there.
yeah, wasted special effects.
Yeah, which you notice they didn't use, even though we did hear both sides of the conversation as shot. But no split screen.
Do you remember any split screen ever being used on this show? Maybe
that's a good question. I can't think of one. No,
not even during these conversations. Shot reverse shot is just as easy and much cheaper too. Now, on page 7, there's a note from Semple that says, minimize confab over phone. A strange threat in Gotham City. It could be King Tut. I guess that's what Semple wanted Gordon to say.
Right. But, yeah, I mean, as shot, they still don't mention Tut at all before the opening theme and commercial break.
Right.
Semple seems to be suggesting bringing up Tut earlier here, but he does that. That's not what ended up happening.
Yeah, the closest we get to an overt statement of who the villain is in the opening is when Dick says, this means a battle royal, which, that's a line that remains in the final version.
So I was wondering why they kept that and they cut everything that was leading up to it. It kind of comes out of nowhere as shot. Interior study, day. As Bruce crosses to the bat phone, Dick enters through another door. He's wearing his Pony League baseball uniform. Bruce, into phone. Yes, Commissioner. Split screen, Bruce and Gordon. Gordon, we're under the gun, Batman. The city's just been given an ultimatum. Bruce, curious, by whom? Gordon, that's part of the riddle of the Sphinx. Bruce, Sphinx? Commissioner, did you say Sphinx? Gordon, yes, does that strike you as significant? Bruce, if I didn't know my old nemesis of the Nile had died 5 years ago, I'd suspect that this was the work of that master of disguise, King Tut. Gordon, King Tut, that mad merchant of menace. Is it possible, Batman? Is there any chance he's still alive? Bruce, recent events would seem to indicate so. Gordon, then he won't rest until Gotham City is at his feet. Bruce, steely. Perhaps, but he will have a fight on his hands. He hangs up. Wipe out Gordon. Dick, holy hieroglyphics. This means a battle royal. Bruce, to the bat poles.
Yes, Commissioner?
A strange and terrible threat to Gotham City. An ultimatum from the remote past.
We're on our way.
Holy hieroglyphics. This might mean a battle royal.
Not the first tick, nor the last. To the Bat Pulse.
He's the grand old man of Marvel. Stan Lee was involved in the creation of some of the world's favorite comics characters, like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor, and the Hulk. But he didn't create them on his own. Artists like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were also instrumental in the creation of these characters, but many fans of the Marvel movies don't even know their names. Did Stan take too much credit by design? Or was he just given the credit because he's more media-friendly? Millions of words have been written about Lee, both to praise him and disparage him. What are the books about Lee that you should read? On Deconstructing Comics, we're going to screen the books about Lee so you don't have to. Join us, true believer, as we read as many books about Stan Lee as we can stand, and compare them to each other. Find Deconstructing Comics in your favorite podcast app. Excelsior.
Hello, I'm Ken Holtzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from indieplanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
Now, here's something weird that we need to keep in mind as we're going through the rest of the script. On 7A, Bruce says, and I quote, "If I didn't know my old nemesis of the Nile had died 5 years ago, I'd suspect this was the work of that master of disguise, King Tut." Since when is King Tut a master of disguise?
Yeah, well, in this version he is. He does disguise himself later on. Apparently, the being a mummy was part of that idea, I'm thinking.
Yes.
But then other places also he disguises himself.
Right, so disguising himself as a mummy lasts into, remains in the final version, but that's no longer a motif of his mastery of disguise. Also, he's an ex-jockey.
Yeah, well, we'll be getting to that in a bit here.
Mystifies me.
The writers have too much conversation between Bruce and Gordon and Semple writes, all this belongs post-teaser in Gordon's office. And so that part about my old nemesis of the Nile is Bruce talking on the phone in the study still. And of course that does end up in Gordon's office in the final. So then we just have the Battle Royal line and the main titles and everything, and then to Gordon's office. But yeah, a lot of that dialogue is moved to this point. And Semple has a lot of notes on this page. It's PDF page 11, typed page 8. Polish Batman's dialogue. Write him straighter throughout. Writing Batman straight is something that Semple writes again and again in here. Meaning really serious and, not, no sense of humor, right?
Right. Yeah, and what I don't get, though, is exactly what straighter means when we come to this line by Dennis and Barrett. The note, polished dialogues, Batman's dialogue, write him straighter than throughout, comes right next to this line by Batman. Quote, "Gentlemen, I think we must accept the chilling prospect that King Tut survived that warehouse fire of 5 years ago and has come back to plague us." Now, what's not straight about that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not
Maybe
saying it's not... Yeah, what does it mean?
Maybe it's something, he's referring to something, or more of a general comment, maybe, not just about that particular line. Although, I don't know, I don't really see anything on this page that isn't straight.
Well, maybe the language is just a little bit too florid. Batman does have, high-level vocabulary, even when he's written straight. But perhaps just the adjectives, like chilling.
Yeah,
but that seems appropriately melodramatic in a Batman, Adam West Batman sort of way.
Well, I think as I'm looking at the bottom of that page, I'm thinking it's kind of situational. So O'Toole is in the Gordon's office scene saying, I mean, the voice was definitely female from the Sphinx. Of course, I never knew this guy King Tut. You see, I'm just a rookie. Batman, no need to be apologetic, young man. You must have been just a youth when that King Tut was the uncrowned king of crime in Gotham City. You must have been just it sounds like he's not focused on the business at hand. It sounds a little bit too conversational, where, when there's a new threat to Gotham City, he's always really focused.
Right. So straight could mean have a connotation of focus and matter-of-factism too.
Mm-hmm. And Semple notes where O'Toole says the Sphinx is a woman, Batman. So this Mad Pharaoh has a Cleopatra, which does show up in the final. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then on 8A, or page 12 of the PDF, is what you were talking about. A crooked jockey. So this is O'Toole says, who was he really, Batman? King Tut. Batman, a crooked jockey who was thrown during a race. When he recovered consciousness, he had the strange delusion that Gotham City was the reincarnation of ancient Thebes, and he himself that former pharaoh known to history as King Tut. Why? Why a jockey? And does he ride Bumbershoot?
Gosh, I sure hope so. The only thing I can think of, the only justification I can think of, is that the authors were looking for a way to motivate him getting hit on the head in some spectacular way. But that's still horseback riding. Yes, there were horses in ancient Egypt, I think. But at least there were in Cecil B. DeMille movies about ancient Egypt.
But yeah, the Egyptology professor makes a lot more sense because he would have a lot of knowledge about Egypt. And so it seems really random for a horse jockey to get knocked on the head and start thinking he's an Egyptian king.
Absolutely, and it's master of disguise horse jockey. Maybe he disguised himself as a horse. Who knows?
Getting hit on the head gave him all kinds of knowledge he didn't have before.
Yes, like how to put on fake mustaches when he needed to, or wrap himself in mummy wrappings.
So yeah, I had a question here. I mean, it comes up in all the Tut episodes. Where would Tut get slave girls? I mean, he must be paying them. I mean, and nobody ever talks about charging him with enslaving anyone.
No, that's true. With white slavery.
I mean, I have to wonder question. Where all the staff comes from and all the decor and everything.
Right. We know that he apparently just inhabited a leftover Egyptian, building from an exhibition.
Right. Yeah.
Semple suggests that along the way, and then it ends up in the Desmond Doomsday's introduction to Tut's hideout in the final version.
Well, and Robin mentions it in part 2 in the Batcave.
Yes, I guess that's right.
Yeah.
It leads us to this vacant area at coordinates 47 to 61.
Wait a minute! Coordinates 47 to 61. Holy false front! Fake Egyptian palace from last year's Gotham City exposition.
That's funny. Oh, on page 8A as well, there's a note from Semple. O'Hara is too argumentative with Batman and Robin. He acts almost subordinate to Gordon through here. That I'm a little bit confused about. Yes, I agree that O'Hara is too argumentative. He's disagreed with Batman already when Batman thinks that Tut may have come back, when O'Hara says, no, he was blown to smithereens, there's no way.
Does he mean insubordinate?
Yeah, I'll bet he does.
Because, I mean, as chief of police, he is subordinate. But
Right. But I think that must be I think you've hit the nail on the head, because I couldn't figure out who he referred to. I thought it was O'Hara, but then I'm thinking, who, Batman? He acts almost subordinate to Gordon, but if he means insubordinate, or if because I have noticed there's some things that are cut off on the script. Like there are some bits of Semple's notes that I can't read. No, this couldn't have been cut off because the word subordinate is, further to the left of the margin than the stuff that's getting cut off.
Yeah, this is just a bad word choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'll bet you're right.
But yeah, I mean, O'Hara is really making a stink about, not being convinced. He says, I'm not convinced yet. Why would King Tut want to give us a warning he's making a comeback? Robin, maybe the Sphinx will give us a clue. Batman, good thinking, lad. Let's take a look at that inscrutable lady. They lope out. O'Hara, why noise it around? That's all I'm asking. Why?
And I can tell you why why O'Hara's being insubordinate. It's because, once again, the screenwriters want to make a transition between O'Hara yelling, why are we noising this around, and the Scrivener and the Vizier saying the same thing in the following scene.
Yeah, which they do in the final. But, yeah, there are several transitions like that are all lost in the final.
Yeah, again, it's clever, but it's, there's more time to do that sort of thing in a film. There's more contemplative time for the audience to kind of get their heads around those kinds of transitions and appreciate them. But there's not really much place for it in a 22-minute episode.
Well, and I'm thinking, too, I mean, we know how quickly they had to do these episodes, and that would have taken some extra effort, I think, to put those transitions together, and I think they probably just didn't want to bother with it.
Well, I can think of other moments, not anything specific, but there are other moments in the show when transitions like that get made, like based on the last word of a line or a similar line that cuts to someone else saying basically the same thing. I think the sin here, if there's a sin, is that Dennis and Barret are building to that transition here. They make O'Hara insubordinate, earlier on in that scene, and then build up to it, where that's just not necessary. The transition could have worked without it. In the end, the transition just got thrown out entirely.
So then the first scene that King Tut is in, is pretty much what was shot. Now, this is where I located exactly the only ad lib, if it's an ad lib, it's here, where Tut says, "You're a twit."
Phase 2 will now be put into being. Are there any questions?
I got one.
You may speak, Royal Scrivener.
Like why? I mean, why dip that hunk of rock in the park to tip off the suckers what we're gonna do?
You're a twit.
God, I love it when Bono gives those slow burns.
We'll see in the later scripts if it's there, but I suspect that was an ad lib.
Yeah, I bet you're right. It certainly feels the most Bonoian.
Yes.
Of any point in the script, or any point in the final show as shot.
Now, there are some references to the royal bark, and we saw it also in King Tut's coup script.
Yeah. Yep.
And we were trying to figure out what a bark was. So it's
just a boat. It's a ship.
Well, it explains it as being a combination of a barge and an ark. I thought I saw that in here somewhere.
Well, maybe.
But it's mentioned a couple of times in the broadcast version too, but I just felt like it was maybe too obscure, because most people never heard of a bark other than what comes out of a dog's mouth or is on a tree. I'm
not so sure that's true in 1966-67.
Okay.
I think it was a more. If you look it up on Wikipedia, bark is also spelled BARQUE. A sailing ship of 3 or more masts, the rear mast being rigged for a fore and aft rather than a square sail. Blah blah blah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's a word that Shakespeare uses constantly to describe ships. It's not all that uncommon. It is. What's the word I'm looking for? It's somewhat outdated, but it's still around.
Okay. Then we've got Batman and Robin in the park, looking at the Sphinx, and the wind sound comes up. And so this is pretty much the same. Semple adds Robin's line. He writes, Robin, a challenge, etc., etc., in response to what the Sphinx says. And then Batman's line is originally written here. It looks like, so be it, cast off Robin. And cast off is changed to up we go, which was in the final.
Mm-hmm. Now, on page 11, as they get closer to it, Robin says, what do you think, Batman? Is it an Egyptian horse? And Semple's note is too obscure and has been used in other scripts too. So I guess it's obscure because it's a reference to the Trojan horse, because Batman immediately asks if there must be a secret entrance somewhere. But is there another episode that mentions the Trojan horse?
I can't remember one.
I'm course, sure one of our listeners will.
As broadcast, Robin says, could it be full of King Tut's henchmen? That's very clear.
Yeah.
And the handle on the back of the Sphinx, in the final, Batman sounds much more panicked about Robin touching it, where here he just says, wait, Robin, don't touch it. In the final is, don't touch that handle, Robin.
Yeah, in general, it seems that the authors thought of Batman as a cooler character. Like, kind of suave. He kind of uses flowery language to express a kind of, not really jadedness, but just like, kind of a lounge lizardy certainty about himself that Semple has no time for that.
Or, yeah, maybe a little bit more James Bond.
A little bit, yes, a little bit. I think that's the mot juste. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to get stabbed in the head with this sword.
Now, the Nefertiti part of the scene is missing here. There's no signaling with the compact. There's no exploding snake. There's no bat fight. There's a lot of omit.
Yeah, this is where pages 12, 13, and 14 get crammed together.
And it jumps straight to the museum where Bruce is giving that tour and talking about the Egyptian crown, which on the show just kind of comes and goes, and we never come back to it, where in the script that crown is Tut's target. That's what he wants to steal.
Yeah, I hadn't caught that, but you're right.
But yeah, I mean, I'd never even really noticed the crown watching this before, because I'm just kind of paying attention to Bruce giving the tour, and it doesn't look the way I imagine a crown looking, but it's an Egyptian crown and not a British one or something. So
right,
it doesn't maybe look like I would expect.
Yeah. It doesn't have a big Christian cross sticking out of it.
No, not at all.
Like a chess king.
Yeah. Well, and it's BC also, so that would be really odd if it had a cross on top.
That was my point.
But yeah, a lot of this is the same. But I got to thinking more about why all this happens with Tut disguising himself as the mummy. I realized finally that in making it to the final, there's this whole bit that Tut is now making the claim that he's risen from the dead, but it doesn't quite make any sense because he was already there.
Yeah.
And he had fought Batman before in an episode that doesn't exist. So I'm not sure why the idea of he's risen from the dead.
Yeah, why did that remain in the final version of the episode? In the original version, in this version, having him rise from the dead in front of Batman would have made a certain amount of sense, theatrically anyway, because he supposedly died in that warehouse fire.
That's true. That's true. Also, I really don't know why he wanted to kidnap Bruce, especially in the final. And here, in part 2, he's writing a ransom note.
The ransom note is he's ransoming Bruce for the entire Egyptian collection at the museum, correct?
I believe so. But, in here, I mean, attempts to kidnap Bruce a second time and ends up with Batman, and then the whole idea of kidnapping Bruce Wayne disappears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like flailing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some of the changes made to the script ended up losing some connecting bits that would have been nice.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to more of those later. There's some super titles again. What? The Mummy is movie. Can it really be alive after 35 XXXV centuries?
Yeah, and why Roman numerals would be in the super title when this is an Egyptian king? I guess it just signifies ancientness, and that's all he's looking for, all the writers are looking for. But, you know, reading these super titles made me think about what the show would have been like if all of Desmond Doomsday's lines had been super titled. And it would have seemed very strange, I think.
Uh-huh.
It would have been like watching a silent film.
Yeah, kind of. And if you were just listening to the TV, you'd miss all that.
Yeah, you know, and maybe there was some attempt being made to convince, you know, kids to read. It was a way of suggesting that the show was educational, so not damaging to the brains of our, you know, young impressionable boys who might want to put towels on and jump off the roof. I don't know.
Bruce's line is, "There a doctor in the house? It's here."
Yes, and he screams it in the final version. His panic is real.
Yeah, I mean, Adam West is really turning it to 11 in that whole museum bit. And, you know, in the next scene, there are some lines that were added later where well, we do have the line, "The imagination boggles," but there's, like, "What a man he must have been," and all that. And he's really pouring it on there.
Yeah, cranking up the old Wayne Foundation charm. Maybe that's, you know, that makes me think of something. Perhaps Semple is maybe, you know, subtly or maybe tacitly trying to suggest the difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne whenever he says, you know, you've got to write Batman straighter. Wayne still speaks like a lounge lizard a good chunk of the time, even in this episode, but that's not the way Batman talks. Batman is more matter of fact. Batman is less flowery, uses fewer adjectives. Just a thought.
Yeah, he might have been thinking about that. I guess, definitely Adam West had been cast, and they had shot the pilot and maybe a little bit more. So this script has Nefertiti lurking in the museum, wearing a cloak and cowl. But yeah, she doesn't appear there in the final. But yeah, here's the mummy and all this. This doesn't look like Semple's handwriting here. I think this is somebody else.
This is 21?
On, let's see, typed page 19, PDF page 22. I put all my notes in the PDF this time. I'm saving paper.
I'm on paper, so you can just call out the page numbers themselves.
Okay. I have to scroll back up to look at them. Yeah, it's page 19. So someone has written... So we're talking about the quote-unquote orderlies who have come in the ambulance to take allegedly to take the mummy, who has awakened from the dead.
But they're actually secretly the Vizier and the Scrivener, right?
Right. And there's some idea that we shouldn't be able to recognize them. I think that's partly written in the script. Yeah, so two orderlies hurry into the office carrying a stretcher, the type with wheels, and set to work. We should not dwell on the orderlies long enough for anyone to recognize them as the Grand Vizier and the Royal Scrivener. And I think you really don't in that scene, kind of in that office. But I think as soon as you get out in the hallway, you can tell.
Yeah, although I realized that I wasn't really looking, I didn't quite recognize them until I remembered, oh yeah, the script says that they're the Vizier and the orderly, not the orderly, the Vizier and the Scrivener.
Well, I think, because they're wearing medical clothes, even when you see their faces, you may not register who they are until they spray Bruce with the knockout gas.
Right.
And someone has written here, now we see... So I can't read this word. Something, the Grand Vizier.
Now we see he's the Grand Vizier.
He's. Okay, that's a weird-looking H.
It's a really weird-looking H.
Now we see he's the Grand Vizier. Yeah. So, yeah, this is all pretty much the same. They put Bruce on the stretcher. Okay, yeah, so this is where it says at the bottom of page 20, constructed like an ancient sailing vessel, half barge, half ark, and carries a small identifying plaque, King Tut's bark. Tut emerges from the museum and climbs into the bark. So, and then we have the hot dog scene. Now, this is also setting us up for something that ends up getting cut.
Mm-hmm. Tut's line on the top of 21 on the script pages is a great moment for Buono to be Buono. Nefertiti, how many times do I have to tell you? Hot dogs ain't fit for a queen is what he originally says. Mm-hmm. But someone not Semple, I don't know that's the same handwriting as before, but it's not Semple's. Queens eat
nectar
and ambrosia, not hot dogs. And that's when Buono goes into his nasaliest Brooklyn accent.
Yeah,
not hot dogs.
Nefertiti, you abandoned wench. How many times must I tell you queens consume nectar and ambrosia, not hot dogs?
That's a great moment.
It's really inspired, the way he changes his whole kind of accent there.
Yeah, it's great.
Right, so Tut makes the phone call, and home and step on it, Nefertiti says. Then we're in the park, and the Sphinx is there again. Now... Nefertiti making an announcement through the Sphinx burps. And of course, the burp doesn't make it to the final.
Yeah,
the next voice you hear will be a burp. Excuse me, the next voice you hear will be King Tut himself.
I'm kind of sorry that didn't make it through. I do love, this comes a little bit later, when they're watching television, or is that in this scene? They're watching television, and in the original, they're watching, pro wrestling on TV, which just... really underscores Nefertiti's, white trash bona fides. But instead they're watching what looks like a demolition derby in the final version of shot. So the burp, I don't know. I love pro wrestling as much as the next person. At the same time, though, hot dogs, pro wrestling, and a burp all, really, give us a very vivid picture of the white trash queen of Egypt.
Now, it's interesting looking at the bottom of page 22, 25 for listeners looking at the PDF, the way that Tut's line was originally written. Thank you, Sphinx. Yes, folks, it's true. I have arisen to take over as king of Gotham City. And to show I mean business, my first royal act, something, perpetrated the kidnapping of Bruce Wayne. So it's changed to a much more kingly line. Loyal subjects and helots. This is your king.
Loyal subjects and helots, this is your king. As our first royal act, we have perpetrated the abduction of your millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne. He will be held prisoner until our royal demands are met. These demands will be made known to you by our inscrutable Sphinx at a later date.
As our first royal act, we have perpetrated the kidnapping of Bruce Wayne. Mm-hmm. That's the rewrite. But of course, the line about him being a millionaire playboy, which was written in by a different hand, is struck out by Semple, who says Bruce is not much of a playboy. That's an interesting, an interesting little insight into Semple's sense of the character, is that while he was a playboy, certainly in the first serial, and there's, lots of connotations in the 40s and 50s Batman of him being a playboy. Playboy is kind of erased as part of Wayne's identity in the show in place of him being an all-around philanthropist. Mm-hmm. That's the much more dominant sense that we get of his character, is that he's using his fortune to do as much good as possible.
Yeah, he's too busy serving on every committee in Gotham City to chase any skirts.
Exactly. or wake up at 3 p.m. and have a martini.
When Tut announces these demands will be made known by the Sphinx at a later date. In the meantime, the police are warned not to interfere. Originally, was to mess around, and if Batman interferes, Bruce Wayne has had it. Remember, someone has written, "Remember, Batman, Bruce Wayne's life is in your hands." That does make it into the final. Mm-hmm. Then there's a scene cut here where there's switchboard operators who were dealing with an overload of calls coming in. Mm-hmm. And reporter with a press card in his hat and shouting into a phone, cop in a prowl car shouting into Mike, O'Hara shouting into 2 phones, Bosch crossed out commissioner. Oh yeah, it's Inspector Bosch from the pilot trying to cope with 3 phones. So I guess that people are all calling in about the Sphinx business, but that all goes out the door.
Yeah, and the super titles describe this on page 23 as pother, panic, pandemonium, profanity. There's no reason to keep that. In fact, the whole pother, if you to coin a phrase, supposedly incited by the appearance of the Sphinx, is reduced to what looks like about 14 people standing around it in the park. Doesn't look like it's causing pandemonium or profanity to me. Must have run out of extras on the 20th lot or the Desilu lot that day.
So we go to the ambulance. So we've got the line about, well, in the final it's about old Mo got the hot squat, but it's old Bugsy in this version. And that line is made more complicated in the final, so it has a double negative and doesn't quite make sense. I'm not sure why it was revised. It's nice here. I think he's going to wind up with the keenest mob since poor old Bugsy got the hot squat.
Wonder how much he's going to ask for Bruce Wayne. I hear he's a rich millionaire.
You know, Harry, that Tut's a kook, but he's got brains. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't wind up with the keenest gang since old Mo got the hot squat.
And now, the other line, the Scrivener's line, is written after it here, but he says it before in the final. Wonder how much he's going to ask for Bruce Wayne. I hear he's a rich millionaire as opposed to a poor millionaire.
I was going to say.
Then we go to Wayne Manor. Now, this is Dick discovering that that Bruce Wayne has been kidnapped, and this scene, of course, gets moved to the Batcave because of a note that Semple wrote on PDF page 33, which would be page 30 in the printed, if you've printed it out.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I see. I'm with you.
So, yeah, and it made sense to move it to the Batcave. And so then we don't have to deal with Aunt Harriet at all. You know, she shows up in the scene on printed page 26, and that's all cut out. Yeah, so where Semple wrote on printed page 30, wouldn't Robin do something even if only to wait for signals in Batcave rather than moping around house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the kind of characterological policeman in Semple comes out strong here.
Now, Bruce getting out of the ambulance is a bit different here. Mm-hmm. He gets his arms partway free, like up to the elbows, and gets his gag off. And then he's able to touch the floor with his hands and kind of propel himself out the door. Mm-hmm. Interesting that they changed that. I'm not quite sure why. It kind of makes sense that he would be able to... that they maybe would be a little more likely to be able to knock the door open. You know, as it is, I'm not really buying it.
No, but it goes by so fast that one hardly has time to register the difference between the script and the final shooting.
Uh-huh. And as Bruce is rolling down the street on the stretcher, there's a whole obstacle course here in the script that all gets cut. Mm-hmm. Upbound cars swerve to avoid a collision. A huge truck can't swerve, passes over it, the stretcher.
Yeah, Semple's got a question mark next to that.
Yeah. It hits oil slicks, slews around so that Bruce is traveling downhill head first, bounces on raised manhole and is momentarily airborne. A dog chases the stretcher, yelping joyously. Front wheel catches in broken pavement, swinging the stretcher end for end and projecting Bruce downhill, feet first again.
And 4 days and $90,000 later, they've shot the scene. Now it'll just take another $10,000 to edit
it. And by the way, we're going to have to skip 2 weeks of the show because we're so far behind schedule.
And budget.
Or maybe we can bring in Lyle Waggoner to do Batman in some of the episodes. So we can stay on schedule.
Yeah, so they could, have somebody stand behind the Bruce Wayne dummy that shows up a few scenes later and make its lips move.
So he's heading, of course, on the stretcher, heading for the 300-foot drop. But as written, apparently we've got a scene looking right at the edge of the cliff and freeze framing. Right as the stretcher is about to go over the cliff.
Mm-hmm. Wait, what page are we on?
So, printed page 30.
Okay.
So, that's the end of part 1. And then we've got a couple pages of the quick series of freeze frames. Although hardly any of these lines are kept. It's completely rewritten in the final. It does have a close shave, but
right, and nothing about the dish.
No dish.
Another dish. that may be the only example of a Desmond Doomsday opening summary in which a shot is entirely devoted to cheesecake. An entire beat of the summary is just about the dish.
Now,
Nefertiti, that is.
He's referring back to, what was it, the Mad Hatter that had a dish, another dish?
Mm-hmm.
And so
yes,
here's yet another dish.
Okay, you're right. So not the only beat of the summary devoted to cheesecake.
Yeah. He should have said yet another dish. That would have worked a little better.
Would have been more fun for us, sure.
Yeah. So, beginning of part 2, unfreeze frame as camera pulls back to show what has arrested the plunging stretcher, Bruce. His arms, bent straight up from the elbows, have caught the lowest timber. He's straining now to pull himself and the stretcher back from the abyss. So, he doesn't come loose from the stretcher here. He's still tied to it.
Ah. Yes, well, that would that would make more sense considering he was tied to it before.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why the impact in the final should cause him to suddenly come loose from the stretcher and it goes off the cliff, but it's more dramatic to see something plunging down the cliff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And it seems less like he's trying to save the hospital a couple of $1,000 by hanging onto the gurney. Okay, so bottom of page 31B, as it's noted here.
Right.
So there's a stage direction that says, stock of the palace. It stands on a hill with no other buildings near it. Strongly resembles the Temple of Karnak. We finally don't... We end up in the final version as shot with no exterior shots of this World's Fair or exhibition building, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually get any stock shots at all.
Except... later on, when Robin looks it up on the Bat computer.
Oh, right.
There's a stock shot there. I wrote in here, I didn't write in the page, I wrote in the timing on the DVD, 15 minutes and 45 seconds. But yeah, this is where Semple says maybe left over from some World's Fair or something.
Right.
And then here's where they're watching, where in Tut's bark, they're watching the wrestling match, but it's changed to Demolition Derby. I wonder if they just didn't have any stock footage of a wrestling match that they could use.
Yeah, it might have been copyrighted or something.
Yeah.
The Demolition Derby looks like it's a bunch of duplicates of ZZ Top's Eliminator car running into each other.
Another example of making Tut's dialogue more kingly, as written, I want to catch the news, and it's changed to I wish to peruse the news in the final.
Yeah. Also, probably just to save money, the TV on which the wrestling match that is the Demolition Derby is viewed is not set into the stomach of the ancient Egyptian love goddess Hathor. Sure, it was a lot cheaper just to shoot a TV.
Yeah, just plain old
sitting
TV.
on a stand. Yep, and do a little mat work to make it seem to show Demolition Derby.
So then the news is not something in Gordon's office with Batman. It's a man-on-the-street reporter who happens to run into Batman.
Right, and whose name happens to be George Street, which is embarrassing.
Yeah, and George and the newscaster, the anchor is Walter's studio.
Disgraceful.
I mean, can Stanley Ralph Ross even come up with that?
I know, and I scribbled darlings in the margin. Kill them all.
I didn't even quite know what to make. Walter's studio, what does that even mean? But yeah, okay, and George Street, Walter Studio, right? Because George is on the street and Walter's in the studio.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of a much better joke in The Simpsons in which their eye in the sky guy, the guy who does the traffic on The Simpsons, is named Ernie Pie, and he calls himself Ernie Pie with Ernie in the sky. When he's announcing the traffic, he doesn't even call himself Pie in the sky, and his last name is Pie.
So the conversation that George Street has with Batman is similar to his conversation with Gordon as shot. Some changes in the Tut Nefertiti dialogue. After Nefertiti says Batman, he turns me on. As written, Tut says, Nefertiti, that's disloyal. And of course, it's changed to, we could have you filleted for that. She also doesn't say groovy. She just stops with handsome and clean cut. And some rearranging of the order of things in this scene. And Tut refers to his ministers as fools, and it's changed to ninnies.
Yeah, much more Victor Bononian.
Mm-hmm. So there's no mistaking Alexandria for the DC suburb.
Right, which is actually kind of funny.
Yeah. So, and there's no dragging Nefertiti off to the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she remains in his good graces here, and we cut quickly to the Batcave as Batman is coming back. And Robin's line here is, Batman, why in the name of the ding-dong dynasties are you batting off to Egypt?
Now, this is where Semple's recommendations, let's call them, start to get pretty hot and heavy about how to write Robin. That gets interesting. He writes in the margin, Robin would have understood the plan much earlier. No surprise.
To him.
Cut off.
No surprise to him.
That part's cut off on my copy.
Okay.
And then Batman as well calls Robin my impatient young friend and old man within 3 lines. And Semple has written, the boy's name is Robin. And, it's just thinking back on the many years of the show, or there are many years of watching these 3 seasons, it is true that those kinds of euphemisms just don't get used. The old chum occasionally, but almost always Batman calls Robin Robin.
Yeah. So this is the point where we mostly diverge from what's in the final. So we don't have Aunt Harriet sent to the country. And when Batman says, this time I want him to succeed at kidnapping Bruce Wayne, that's the end of the scene. And, there's no kind of twisting it, like kind of succeeding. He really wants Tut to succeed this time. And more super titles. Good heavens, allow himself to be snatched? Has Batman gone batty? Or is it another stratagem? And yeah, Semple's note, unnecessary use of titles. Now, this is another transition, because then Robin says, it's another stratagem, which Semple has written, too wordy for Robin. He's a gee-whiz kid all the way through. Batman, yes, lad, if all goes well, I'll end up in King Tut's secret lair. Robin, and I'll plot your course on the two-way transistor tracker. His face falls. But Batman, I'll be here missing all the fun. Semple's note, wrong thought. If Robin's task is to track on Batscope, he wouldn't bitch about it.
Right.
The Batman, then I suggest you borrow Dick Grayson's bicycle and follow us. Semple's note, a bit silly, no?
Right, so the takeaway here is that Robin is a good soldier. He's not going to complain about... And it's actually something that the character would have done in the comics, at least in the 40s. He would have complained and whined about not being allowed to go along, and he might have even, snuck out on his own to follow Batman. But not here. That's not the way Semple wants him written.
Yeah, well, I imagine... the Robin of the 40s comics, he's very much a reader stand-in, right? And I think probably they were anticipating that's what the reader would do if he were Robin. He'd say, oh, no, Batman, I want to go with you. I want adventure, blah, blah, blah. Where, Semple's conception is a little different. Now we're in the foyer of Wayne Manor, and Alfred has just admitted Captain O'Hara... and the cop O'Toole.
No corrections here either.
Nobody corrects it.
Not on Semple's mind right then.
Alfred, I understand your concern, Captain O'Hara, but I know Mr. Wayne won't take kindly to the idea, O'Hara. Nevertheless, my good man, I've got my orders to protect Bruce Wayne, and protect him I will. Semple's note, too fancy for plain-spoken O'Hara. CF, his speech top of next page, which is correct. So they're kind of veering back and forth between Semplian and very unsemplian.
And the line that he considers correct goes like this at the top of page 38. O'Hara, them black-hearted abductors, sir. I tell you, it's a crime what these hooligans get away with today. Now, none of that makes it into the final because that scene doesn't happen.
Right.
But it is a much better... It's a much more Semplian O'Hara line, for sure.
Yeah, and this is PDF page 43, if listeners are in the PDF.
Gotcha.
But now, that's interesting. Bruce calls O'Hara Chief, even though we had Captain on the previous page twice. But so, anyway, the police are intent on protecting Bruce Wayne from being kidnapped, and Bruce wants to be kidnapped. But he can't say that.
No, of course.
Of course, everybody believes Batman's out of the country. So, now they've got another Irish cop, O'Houlihan, who's going to be coming at 10 p.m. And Dick and Bruce...
First name McShaughnessy.
Dick and Bruce talk privately, Dick saying, that rather complicates matters, doesn't it? And Semple writes, too wordy. Should be, for example, gosh, this makes it tough, doesn't it?
Perfect.
Yes. Bruce says, yes, the one thing we don't want is an overzealous police force foiling the kidnappers. Semple again, as always, try to write Bruce/Batman straighter. It will be funnier.
Now that's interesting. Bruce and Batman need
Bruce
to be written straighter. But that's not the way that the final version of the museum talk is written.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it's written as straight.
I wonder how much Adam West had to do with that, because I'm sure he was trying to differentiate the two.
I would think so.
So I don't know if he got to talk with Semple much, because Semple wasn't there much, and they didn't have Zoom back then, or Skype, or
or a pandemic. But maybe the difference here is not so much about the kind of florid language, but just having Batman call the police force overzealous would not be something that either Bruce or Batman would do, because it seems to criticize the police force.
That's true.
When in fact, both Batman and Bruce would be, almost like, bend over backwards to be solicitous about the kind of sanctity of the police force.
Right. Must cooperate with the police at all times.
Exactly. He's a duly deputized, after all.
Yeah, even if they're goofballs, we'll never admit that they're goofballs.
Their hearts are in the right place.
So, okay, Bruce is in a smoking jacket, hard at work at his desk. The French windows stand invitingly open. Aunt Harriet wheels in a walnut serving cart on which are a silver tea service and a glass of milk. This is page 39. Bruce looks up with a smile. Bruce, Aunt Harriet, it can't be time for late tea already. Aunt Harriet, it's 10 p.m. and warm milk time for a certain young man. Where is he? Bruce, innocently. Dick? Why, I thought he'd gone up to bed. Probably sound asleep by now. So Bruce has this transistor tracker signal device, which he's planning to carry with him when he's kidnapped, which emits a signal which is picked up in the Batcave. So that there's a bit that makes it into the final, but it's a tracer in Batman's cowl. So Aunt Harriet is worried that the kidnappers are going to come in the window. Bruce is trying to calm her down. No, don't worry about it. More rewriting of lines. Bruce, now, Aunt Harriet, you were a brick through the whole something. It's all crossed out. The whole something mess. Don't go to pieces now. Besides, the police are on duty. Change to now, Aunt Harriet. Dick tells me you were a tower of strength all the time I was away.
Yeah, calling someone a brick is very British.
We don't know anything about these writers. Were they British, I wonder?
No idea.
Should look into them. Yeah. So then O'Houlihan comes in. O'Toole then leaves, so changing of the guard here, because it's 10 o'clock. And Aunt Harriet goes to bed. Now, this bit... I wrote in my notes, Holy Gilligan's Island. So Bruce feels like he has to drug O'Houlihan so that O'Houlihan doesn't mess around and save him from the kidnappers. So he drugs his milk, and then the drinks get switched, or tea, sorry. Drugs his tea, and then Bruce ends up drinking the drugged tea and gets knocked out.
Yes, with super titles telling us, oh no,
yeah.
Bruce, don't do it, don't touch it, don't drink that cup, stop, the tea is drugged, you did it yourself.
What a revolting reversal. And then it turns out O'Houlihan is actually Master of Disguise King Tut.
Yes. Pistachio disguisey.
As if we wouldn't recognize Victor Buono's body type.
Do you suppose that the reason that King Tut was initially a jockey in this script is because they had somebody in mind who was short? Maybe not Victor Buono, but maybe the star they were considering was an extremely short person.
That could be. Well, yeah, and it talks about him wearing something to make him look taller. So Vizier pulls off Tut's shoes, which we see are built up to increase his height a foot. So, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so he was a jockey and he was short.
Right, so Buono is short too, but that, this doesn't necessarily mean that Buono was their first choice. That would be interesting to find out as well.
I can't imagine Buono as a horse jockey.
No, it'd have to be an awfully sturdy horse, shall we say.
Yeah.
No ponies.
Okay, so Bruce, out cold because he drank the drugged tea, and he did not turn on the bat tracker. So it's similar to the tracker in the final getting broken when Batman gets beamed.
Right.
And so then we're at Tut's, and Nefertiti is eating a pizza, and Bruce is in a big jar. Nefertiti is not. There are no pebbles. It's just Bruce in a jar.
Right, no excruciating pebble torture.
Yeah. No pebbles, no Bam Bam.
I wander around in the Twilight Zone, a little baby Flintstone on my own.
Nefertiti, Bruce Wayne, he ought to bring in $1 million in small unmarked bills. Tut, no, my love, I'm not asking a cent. An exorbitant ransom to be sure, but not money. Nefertiti, what else is there? Bruce, I'm afraid you're out of luck, my friend. I gave instructions that in the event I was kidnapped again, no ransom of any kind was to be paid. Tut, apparently you place a low value on your life. Bruce, no, I simply felt you were so incompetent I would have no trouble escaping, changed to I wouldn't be a prisoner for long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the incompetence thing would be too ironic, since in the script, Bruce ended up being incompetent enough to drink his own drugged tea. The irony would be too great.
Tut threatens to, he says he's going to send the ransom note and cut off one of Bruce's ears and pin it to the note. And someone has written here, ABC objects, but it's crossed out. But yeah, I can't imagine that, even though it doesn't actually happen, I can't imagine that making it in the final.
No, not into a children's program.
So Tut leaves, and Nefertiti's talking with Bruce. Bruce is trying to get her to help him. She gives him a bite of her pizza.
Which Bruce says, thank you, it's delicious. It does have a tantalizing aroma.
And he finds out that she's a belly dancer. And he, picks up on her crush on Batman and offers to introduce her to Batman as an incentive to help him get out. But she says, I couldn't do that. It's against my code of ethics.
Well, she is presented as someone who is kind of, her dialogue is rife with malapropisms. So, and she even says
malapropisms.
Something like, yeah, whatever you want to call them. Her stage diplôme is Big Egypt. She also says that Batman is, quote, not really a knockout in them tights, end quote.
So, but he gets her to turn on the bat sender, the tracker,
right?
So that Robin can find him.
Asking her to, but he the ruse is that he's going to be catching the Sunrise Symphony show.
Yeah, he says it's a radio when it's actually a different kind of radio.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Alfred and Robin in the Batcave pick up the signal. More changed dialogue. Alfred, I think he's coming in now, young Master Robin. Change to, at last, he's coming in now, young Master Robin. Robin, at last. Stand clear, Alfred. Semple writes, not Robin talk. And someone else has written, thank heavens, he's still alive. Anyway, I've got to go to him at once.
That doesn't sound like Robin talk either.
No. Alfred, your bicycle is waiting. Robin, no, that's too slow. Batman is in peril. Alfred, shall I summon a cab? Semple says never, in guise of Robin. Robin, I can't wait. I'm going to take the Batmobile. Semple knows he never drives this. Alfred, oh, Master Robin, you can't do that. Remember, you aren't old enough to have an operator's license. Robin, abashed. You're perfectly right, Alfred. I let myself get carried away, but what am I to do? Alfred, a deep breath. He volunteers. There's but one solution. I shall drive the Batmobile. Robin, you, but Alfred, you don't know how. So it's very different from the final, where he has a driver's license and he is, in fact, Bruce Wayne's driver.
That's right. Completely forgotten about that.
So it'd be pretty odd if he didn't have a driver's license.
That's really funny. But this little scene beautifully sets up Alfred's excitement and delight at being, whenever he's asked to participate in crime fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Because Robin says, Alfred says, but you don't have a driver's license. And Robin says, no, but you do. Alfred's Alan Napier's eyes light up. It's a great scene as it wound up in the final. And it also fits with Semple's desire to make Robin, I guess, smarter, a better soldier, not just because he goes along with what Batman wants, but because he's also thinking ahead. He doesn't just, spontaneously imagine that he'll be driving the Batmobile, vroom, vroom, vroom. He's thinking practically. So a lot of interesting nice little Semplian aspects of the show come together in that scene as shot.
So this page, page 46A, is a revised page. The next page is not, and we can see Semple suggesting this. Alfred drives for first time. What's this? Page 47. Something Dick too young to have license. Can't read some of that. So maybe that's not Semple. Maybe that's Horwitz or somebody.
Yeah, that doesn't look like Semple's writing from the rest of the script.
Anyway, so that's a suggestion that we see taken in the revised pages. I was a little confused about this. So Alfred drives off, but Robin apparently is not in the Batmobile, and Robin's going to direct him somehow.
Yeah, I don't quite get that.
Yeah, I don't understand it. If he's following in the bicycle or what the heck. Because Alfred says, you can instruct me. And Robin, more not Robin talk, as Semple writes, then have at it. Between us, we will bring it off. That sounds kind of British, too, actually.
It does sound British, doesn't it?
So, back in the throne room, Tut on Nefertiti, how does this sound? Tut, by the grace of Osiris, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the Nile, and master of the Mediterranean. 2 commissioners, inspectors, chiefs, judges, politicians, faithful subjects, and helots, greetings. And someone has written in Batman in that list. So that's how he starts his ransom note, I guess. So more talk about cutting off Bruce's ear. Batmobile en route at high speed with Robin intent on road and dashboard. This is apparently the old version was that Robin was driving. But then it's been written in Alfred clutching the wheel desperately with Robin intent on road and dashboard. So, yeah, I'm still not quite sure who's in the car. Bruce rocks the jar back and forth and manages to get it to fall over and break. As the Batmobile is arriving, and it says Robin leaps out. This is a revised page, page 49. Robin leaps out, leaving the motor running, the door open, and dashes out of scene. Okay, here's the jar crashes to the floor and shatters, freeing Bruce. He scrambles to his feet defensively as the thugs spread out to attack. So, looks like there's a fight getting started here. Robin tosses a smoke canister through the door. A thick cloud of blue smoke nearly blots out entire scene. And it swirls. As it swirls, we get brief glimpses of the 2 hoods running helter-skelter, trying to locate Bruce. Another angle. Out of the thick patch of smoke steps Batman. And Semple writes, I fear this just impossible. Not our show.
Now, what do you think he means that's not our show about that?
I
Too
guess
expensive, not possible for Bruce Wayne to change into his Batman costume without the bat poles.
I think, well, that's one point, because I don't think he ever changes costumes anywhere but on the bat poles in the whole history of the series.
Before you email me about that statement, I realize that it's not true. For example, when Bruce and Dick use the Just Add Water bat costumes when they're captives of Louis the Lilac. Can you think of other examples where they changed costumes outside of the Batcave?
That's one point. Also, it's just kind of unbelievable. And as I wrote here in the margin, wholly blown secret identity. Where
seriously.
would Batman come from and Bruce is gone? Could it be?
Yes, good question. Good question.
So, then here's the fight. Pow, boing, crunch, thud. As the smoke thins out, we see Batman standing beside the stacked up bodies of the 2 unconscious thugs. Only 2, but you're stacking them up?
It's a very short stack.
Yes. So they find Tut. Tut says, Batman, I thought you were in Alexandria. Batman, that's what you were meant to think, whereas all this time I've been closing in on you. I'm afraid, Your Majesty, you are about to abdicate. Semple writes, this kind of stuff should be broken up into short exchanges between B and R, always. So Tut runs off. So Batman says, "We failed." I don't think I've ever heard him say that on the show, or not very often. I should have foreseen he would have a portcullis to lower. Oh, yeah, he lowered this cage onto them. Robin, something is crossed out, and Semple is written grimmer, tougher. Robin, Batman, nobody can think of everything. We'll catch up to him someday. Batman, someday won't do, old man. Unless we stop his reign of terror today, crossed out now, I fear Gotham City will not survive as we know it. So Nefertiti sees Batman and passes out because she's a woman, you know. Maybe she can't stand the shock. Anyway, so, okay, they find a note from Tut that's written in hieroglyphics, which Batman incredibly can't read. Come on, Batman can read hieroglyphics.
I know.
He's Batman.
Right, and here instead on page 53 of the script, Nefertiti has to find them King Tut's English hieroglyphic dictionary, which is actually a pretty funny bit, but nevertheless, you're right. His, Batman's college days would surely have supplied him with the necessary knowledge of hieroglyphics to be able to read anything that King Tut could dish out.
Yeah, so she's awake, and she reveals her real name is Myrtle Purgstall. She produces the dictionary. Batman says, that will be a great service, Nefertiti. Anything for you, Batman. So I feel like the whole crush idea was building up to this, that she was going to help with the dictionary.
That's right. Right, she betrayed her boss for the charms of Batman.
Batman, incredible. Robin, what does that Phantom Pharaoh want in exchange for Bruce Wayne? Batman, nothing less than the Met Museum's latest acquisition, the Golden Crown with its precious stones. Robin, but it's a priceless treasure. Batman, more important, it's a symbol of power, and this latest setback won't deter him from trying again. So they're going to go to the museum, and they get outside, and the Batmobile is gone. Right. Now, Tut steals the Batmobile in the final, but there's no explanation about the anti-theft system that was so played up in the early episodes. But here, it's explained that Robin was in such a hurry getting out of the Batmobile that he didn't turn on the anti-theft system, and he left the door open and the engine running.
And the car was actually moving when he left it.
So, I mean, that as we end up with it in the final, it's just, there isn't any security system anymore. Forget all that stuff you saw in the Riddler episode. It's just...
Right. It'd be nice to have an anti-theft system, but there's no time. There's no time in the script anyway. On page 55 of the script, Robin says, I was in such a tearing hurry I didn't activate it, and once again Semple has written, not Robin talk.
A tearing hurry, yeah.
Yes. Britishism again.
Yeah, and Batman, in that case, my careless young friend, we will have to borrow this strange-looking conveyance. Simple, too wordy.
And also, his name is Robin. The boy's name is Robin.
So, also, it turns out there is actually a reason for Tut to steal the Batmobile. Like, some motivation for doing it. Because he was going to go to the museum and claim to have a message from Batman, and being in the Batmobile would give him credibility for being Batman's messenger, and maybe he could get the crown that way.
Right. So, yes, there is motivation.
So, as it is in the final, it's just, he just steals the Batmobile. Who knows? Just to get away, I guess. I don't know. What the heck? Let's steal the Batmobile.
Yeah, he'll call it the Barkmobile, and everything will be hunky-dory.
And so the whole Tut stealing the Batmobile, Robin says, it's all my fault. I ought to be caned for my carelessness. Semple writes, not Robin. He's gee-whiz 15-year-old.
Yes. No matter what a good soldier Robin is, I don't think he would ever recommend corporal punishment for himself.
No. So just as in the final, they chase Tut driving the Bark after the Batmobile. Tut finds more of the gimmicks in the Batmobile the smoke is there. He releases that smoke screen, but then he also, the bat smoke. But there are some others too. And so with the smoke, the stage directions say, the smoke flows back against the windshield, utterly obscuring the world. Batman battles the bark to a halt. As the smoke clears, we see the bark is stopped inches from the edge of the cliff, just clear of the guardrail. Another 2 feet, and the bark would have plunged down 300 feet. Why are all the cliffs 300 feet?
Well, they just have the one cliff, and so they have to redress it every time they shoot another cliffhanger.
Or who knows, it might have been the exact same cliff within the world, that they just happened to be in the same... Well, I guess that cliff is just near the hideout.
Right. It's Gotham Cliff. Everyone nearly falls over it.
See, there's also a bat slick that Tut releases. I guess it's an oil slick.
I suppose.
That's a gimmick that we never saw on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Then he does an emergency bat turn, which, I wrote, nope, they'd have to reshoot it with Tut in the car. And it says stock shot, but you can't do that because the stock shot has Batman and Robin in the car.
Unless you did a really expensive matte shot and pasted Victor Buono on top of Batman.
I think we encountered the same thing in Penguin Goes Straight script. Mm-hmm. And that was Semple, for crying out loud. But
yeah, seriously.
You can't have a bat turn if it's not Batman and Robin in the car.
What they really needed to do was to get, every time one of the guest villains was on set, they needed to film a rear projected bat turn with that villain so they could just use that. That would be their, 50 villains stock footage of the bat turn.
Yeah, so then every villain could steal the Batmobile.
That's right, which nearly happens as the show drags on.
And so rather than the bat beam that they're worrying about him finding, and then he does find it, it's the bat cannon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you get a cannon in the car. They do get him out with the seat ejector, but he ends up in a tree rather than bouncing off the bark.
Right, instead of on top of the bark.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Get me down, Batman, and I'll give you a knighthood and a castle of your own." Batman, "No deal, King Tut. Your reign is over. From now on, your kingdom will be a prison cell." And the tag scene, completely different from the show. I mean, we don't see Tut, remembering that he's a jockey in here at all. It's Bruce and Dick at Wayne Manor. And Aunt Harriet says she got a call from, would have been Nefertiti.
Mm-hmm.
So what name does she give? Can't find it here. But yeah, young woman called earlier, said you promised to introduce her to Batman. Bruce, what did you tell her? Aunt Harriet, I said there was some mistake. You didn't know Batman. Bruce, I don't suppose she left a number. Aunt Harriet, no, I must say she sounded keenly disappointed. Bruce, yes, well, Dick, shall we tackle these geometry problems together? And I wrote in the note in the margin, Bruce misses out on some action.
Yes, and he seems strangely attracted to the 90-degree angles in Dick's geometry lesson. Sorry, family show. Sorry, I should be making the kind of jokes about perpendicularity.
Yeah, so but it's interesting, how much Semple commented on how Batman and Robin talk throughout this.
Yeah, and even at one point when, near the end of the script, when Batman calls Robin my young friend, Semple exasperatedly writes, no. His name is just plain Dick, okay? This is on page 62. So yeah, that was really interesting. Really, really interesting to see how Semple was trying to play thought police as the executive script editor on the show.
Yeah. So we will get to the later versions next time. Also, I didn't think to get any of the comments from the board about the script, so we'll do that next time also. But we do have a Bat Inbox coming up after the break.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
and try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
the early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
And follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave
and stay bold.
Coming up, Bat Audio with Burt Ward and the Bat Inbox. Help support To the Bat Polls and all the Deconstructing Comics shows with a monthly donation to the Deconstructing Comics Patreon page at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. You get outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode, our bi-weekly TV trivia videos, and you can vote in polls for which Bat topic you'd like us to cover next. The current poll is open until midnight the night of June 29th, 2021. So if you sign up now, you can get in on the voting. Further perks at higher support levels, including the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month. So go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
So many famous actors and actresses appeared on Batman. Who is your favorite villain or villainess to work with?
Well, actually, there were so many super actors and actresses that I didn't have any particular one because they were all great. I worked with some, of course, fabulous actors that played some of the more familiar roles. Of course, Burgess Meredith, the Penguin, Cesar Romero, the Joker, Leanne Merriweather, and Julie Newmar, who alternately played Catwoman. But we also had some great old-timies, you know what I mean, oldies but goodies, as you say, such as Tallulah Bankhead, who played Black Widow.
Milton Berle.
Absolutely. And then we had some more...
Otto Preminger.
Yes, Otto Preminger. We also had Joan Collins, who played the Siren,
right.
And Howard Duff and Ida Lupino. Right. So, I mean, we had some really incredible people. It was a lot of fun.
Bat Inbox. We've got more correspondence about episode 160, the Bat Rankings episode. And on the all-seeing, all-knowing 66 Batman message board, there's a lot of conversation on the thread about Black Widow and Falseface and Siren and Catwoman and Londinium, and I'll link to that thread as usual so you can check all that out. But let's go to Batwinged Hornet.
Okay, Batwinged Hornet writes... Great show, guys. You had some interesting choices for just about everything. Now you should pick. Here's a prescription for us. Number 1, the scene or episode where you thought West and Ward, individually or as the duo, were at their overall best as the characters. Number 2, best bat fight, if you have not covered that in the past. Oh boy, that would be quite a journey, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't include that in our list for last time because it would... the amount of research time it would take. I think that's an episode in itself, at least one episode in itself.
Yes, we'll do best bat fight seasons 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, something like that. Like,
and then have a death match, among the 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Okay, see, number 3, best villain theme. Ooh, that actually may be easier than it sounds. Number 4, best episode score. Yes, music was recycled, but at one time there were firsts. That's cool. And number 5, least thrilling cliffhanger. Lawsuit. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na, lawsuit. And here's the real challenge. Gordon and O'Hara's most competent scene and or episode. I like that. I like that one a lot.
I'm sure it's in season 1.
Tax dollars at work. It's gotta be. Maybe it's when they shoot Batman and Robin dead in the alley. Of course, that was all, that was a ruse, so, maybe that was competence. Anyway, as far as bat gadgets go, my favorite would be the bat laser pistol. No explanation needed for that one. Or the batarang. Yes, the batarang's kind of hard to beat.
I'm blanking on the bat laser pistol.
Well, it might have been one of those moments in which Adam West describes that he's going to use the bat laser, which I just love the way he reads that line. Apparently he's not reading the acronym. It's just... he really thought it was a laser. It's like something our grandmother would say. Let's see. Regarding the made-for-TV villains, I've said it before, but Falseface leaves the rest behind by some considerable distance. Aside from the oft-mentioned creepy factor, which was great, he felt like the kind of mystery criminal one would see in Batman stories of the early 1940s, that is, the comic stories, of course, when he was both strange and out there in a way that made him stand out next to the comics-based rogues gallery. He was a villain who not only outwitted Batman and Robin, but his signature, False Faces, was the most practical and realistic. What's more threatening than a villain who can look like anyone else? Joker, Riddler, and Penguin you can see coming a mile away, but Falseface? He could stand right behind you and you'd never know it. In fact, if memory serves, he did that on a couple of occasions in part one of his story. Mm-hmm. True. Yes, Joker, Riddler, and Penguin, unless they're disguised as sheiks, for example. Seems to be a very popular mode of disguise for non-false-face villains.
Yeah, or Charlie Chaplin.
Well, yes, yes, that too. Did Penguin ever disguise himself? Well, yes, he did.
Commodore Schmidlap in the movie.
Right, but that's not much of a disguise. He doesn't even bother to...
Right. Didn't fool Batman and Robin for a second.
Yeah, he doesn't refocus his whack, whack, whack into some other kind of tick.
Okay, so Robin Boy Blunderer responds to Batwing Hornet's suggestion of ranking the best bat fights. Good suggestion. Bat fights seem an under-examined aspect of the show. Early on, the first Joker episode and the Maharaja ones had melee-style fighting. It felt like watching chaos versus the more stylized fight structure that followed. Too bad there's no interviews with the stunt people. Aside from a specific script instruction, it seems the fights were under the jurisdiction of the stunt team and laid out a certain way by them. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they had designations for certain moves, as some examples. Robin assisting Batman punching someone, Batman lifting Robin so he can kick, the combined charge by henchmen, the one hero down, one swinging to help, Robin being carried over the shoulder, etc. Yeah, we've seen all of those for sure.
Yeah, the combined charge by henchmen brings up, 5 or 6 different mental images immediately.
Yeah,
so.
that seems like it was especially characteristic of season 3 fights, but
just going to say that too. Yeah, you're right.
They could quickly format a fight having a certain number of key moves or positions that they liked using, a way to get them filmed as efficiently as possible. Yeah, so there'd have to be some repetition, as there was, because no time to plan them all from scratch.
No, it's true. Although just the differences in the sets for the villains' hideouts probably offered some possibilities as well that were distinct from other fight scenes.
Mm-hmm. Or like in the hen house, throwing eggs.
Yes. Was still one of my favorites for reasons that have less to do with its bat fightiness and more to do with its musical score and just the the flying of eggs. Robin Boy Blunder, again, separate post. I thought about this as its own topic, but I don't know where it could go, really, so I hope it's all right to post here. I just found this interesting. I think in a lot of Stanley Ralph Ross's scripts, he has a well-respected Gothamite turn out to be part of the villain's gang. Reporter Jack something or other from Cat and the Fiddle, Chief Screaming Chicken, yes, evil Cossack guy with Olga, Alan A. Dale from Archer, yes, of course, used car salesman from the first Shame episode. Mm-hmm. Quite a shift from the more fan-type, respectful interactions between Gothamites and the dynamic duo. Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of a mole, a civilian who turns out to be a turncoat.
Right, yeah. The stealth henchman.
Right. And then an email from Stephen Small. Cool question here. How popular is Batman 66 in Japan or Japanese culture? I know of the Japanese Batman comic from years ago. You probably talked about it before, which we did, of course.
We did do the Bat manga episode. Tim here, making changes at the editing stage to give better researched information on this question than I did when talking with Paul. You can hear that glowing performance in the outtakes on Patreon. Batman was shown here from April of 1966 to June of 1967 under the title Kaicho Ningen Batman, which means Batman the Mysterious Birdman. It was on Sunday evenings on Fuji TV. Judging from the schedule shown on Japanese Wikipedia, it seems that for a stretch they were showing 2 parts back-to-back, then they went to showing just 1 episode a week, then 2 back-to-back, then 1 episode again. Obviously, since they quit in June of 67, they didn't get to Season 3. TV Tokyo showed the first 2 seasons again on Tuesday evenings from October 1970 to sometime in 1972. Season 3 was only shown on a satellite broadcaster called Wow Wow from July 1992 to January 1993, and I'm sure only a small fraction of homes were accessing satellite broadcasting, so it wouldn't have made much of a dent in the public consciousness. I was living here at that time, and I certainly didn't know about it. Thanks to Japanese Wikipedia and the site dic.pixiv.net. So you have to find somebody who's like in their 60s and was, a kid in the 1960s to find somebody in Japan who remembers the show. Well, so I know that Bewitched was very popular here. And that still did get shown, in the afternoon, I think, after I arrived here in 1989. But, yeah, Batman seems to have been a bit more of a flash in the pan here. Because, they just showed it for a year, and apparently it tanked when they probably showed the Archer episode, and then nobody wanted to watch it anymore.
Worst episode ever.
So I guess it was a bit of a phenomenon here in 1966, but not really since then.
Right. Yeah. Aside from your 4 kids, to whom I just gave Batman t-shirts, and they maybe have never watched the show. They just know about it from you and me.
Yeah. Well, when you first sent me the DVD set for Christmas 2014, Christy and William and I watched the pilot episodes. But I think that's all that they've seen of it.
Right.
Okay, email from David Masca. The bat syllable device always amused me. Did you get hit on the side of the head, Mr. Wayne? Instead of polishing the old elf cycle, Alfred would benefit from taking a few typing classes. Pick up the pace. And I love how when you see Gordon on the other line, he looks like he's hanging on every word.
Right. Pearls of wisdom from the lips of Bruce Wayne's robot. It doesn't matter whether he sounds a little strangely mechanical today.
The anti-mesmerizing bat reflector in the 13th Hat episode. He also could have used his highly polished belt buckle as it was used in the Ring of Wax arc.
Good point.
And they would give poor Batgirl crap about carrying a compact, yet Batman has a pocket mirror, but by calling it a bat reflector, he can get away with it. Kind of like doll versus action figure. Both sides of the same coin.
That's right. We would never be caught playing, dead playing with Mego Batman dolls. But Mego Batman action figures, that's an entirely different animal.
Overall, when I look at favorite or best moments, I think the first dozen episodes up to When the Rat's Away really have that film noir and gritty feel. The 13th Hat is the first episode, to me at least, that feels formulaic. The best stretch of episodes is in that first season. The Joker Goes to School through Batman Sets the Pace, I think, show the series at the height of its powers next to the initial run of 12 episodes. After Batman sets the pace, the bookworm arc is the strong point of Season 1. I personally think the last Riddler and Penguin arcs are pretty weak. I don't recall what you both said about them. Well, I would agree about Fine Finny Fiends, but the last Riddler Season 1 is Death in Slow Motion, and that was ranked as one of my favorites, so...
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
Regarding window cameos, when Jerry Lewis did the first one, he was on the Fox lot filming Way, Way Out, which is such a dismal film in my opinion. Let's just say his window cameo was the funniest thing he shot at Fox.
Now, I'm no Jerry Lewis expert, but I know at least a few of his better films, like the ones he did with Frank Tashlin, like The Disorderly Orderly from the 60s, but Way, Way Out, never even heard of it. I wonder if it's just never come to video because it was that embarrassing.
When Season 2 kicks off, you can tell the show is getting wise to its own gimmicks, and it's more about stunt casting and trying to be too clever than it is about good scripts, aside from a few bright moments like the Clock King arc. Roughly the last third of the season is a little stronger, and I feel the series makes somewhat of a comeback where it's a nice balance of everything. Those are among the most entertaining episodes of the series. Well, yeah, that's around the time of Pop Goes the Joker, and I like that last Tut of Season 2.
Yeah. That last chunk of Season 2 is somewhat controversial. Like, Pop Goes the Joker is not a favorite among some of our listeners, I know, and some critics, but that's still one that I think of as something of a high point, at least for Season 2.
And Season 3, I contend that it was filmed with the kiddie rerun set in mind, which is why the writing is so juvenile, as if it is intentionally geared to kids watching after school. Then again, it's been years since I produced a hit television series, so what do I know?
Nice little, sucker punch of humility there. That's beautiful. True enough. None of us has ever produced a hit television series either, so what the heck do we know?
So our last one, Paul will read. It's from someone whose name we have talked about on this show before.
Yes, this is really out of the clear blue and a very cool message to get. Email from James Bigwood, co-author with Alan Napier, or editor, I guess we could call him as well, of Not Just Batman's Butler, which we talked about in episode 149. Mr. Bigwood says, hello. I've only just become aware of the episode of your podcast devoted to Alan Napier's autobiography, Not Just Batman's Butler. As the person behind its rediscovery and publication, it was very heartening to listen to your serious discussion of Alan's life and work as presented in his book. I too lament a more thorough discussion of Batman, but as the title indicates, although it was my title rather than Alan's original Footprints in the Sand, Alan thought of himself as much more than just Alfred, and indeed appreciated the job as a great paycheck and a shot at permanent fame rather than as a defining role. As you rightly point out, he was proudest of his work on the stage, and most specifically the British stage, although he never stopped stage work over his years in Hollywood, and did appear on the Broadway and off-Broadway stage intermittently. Thank you for drawing attention to Alan's book. I know he would have appreciated the time and effort you put into the podcast as much as I do. Jim Bigwood. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Jim. Really glad that you happened to come across it. I wonder how that happened, but maybe somebody listened to it and sent him a note so that he could find it himself.
Yeah, or
maybe he just came across it.
Yeah, or sometimes people will set up an automatic Googling of their own name and see what comes up. I do that, but it's never me. It's somebody else with my name.
Well, I have occasionally Googled my name and the Daredevil book to see if there's anything, any new reviews, and come across some new reviews every once in a while. So that's nice to do. But thanks, and I think it's great to that Jim encapsulated or condensed Alan's attitude toward Batman for us in this suggestion that Alfred, he thought of Alfred as a great paycheck and a shot at permanent fame rather than as a defining role, quote unquote. That's a nice takeaway.
Yeah. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we're going to go ahead with the two additional later versions of the Curse of Tut after the name change to the Curse of Tut. I've just received the kind of what I'm calling the intermittent version between the Phantom Pharaoh and the Curse of Tut final. So, and by the time you hear this, that I should have that in the it'll be in the show notes of this episode, and it'll be in the thread about the Phantom Pharaoh on the message board. The final script is already there as we record.
Right, and next time I think we're going to be talking about some of your listeners' comments about the Phantom Pharaoh script as well. Correct?
Right. Yes. Right.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed.
Sayonara.
Check the show notes for our opener Batman Earth 66, the Phantom Pharaoh script, and the 2 subsequent Curse of Tut scripts, the message board thread where you can comment on them and read others' comments, and the thread about the Bat Rankings episode. Batpulls at deconstructingcomics.com is the address to send us any other Bat missives you might want to share with us, or to send us any interesting Bat audio that we haven't used yet on the show. Thanks to Chris Cavanaugh for the Burt Ward interview you heard in this episode. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Batpulls and vote for future podcast topics by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. We're on Twitter at DeconComics, and recent Batpulls episodes are now available in the Deconstructing Comics YouTube channel. You may recall that I said my apartment makes me cough, and I started a GoFundMe back in January to raise $3,500 to move. Thanks to everyone who's already donated. Believe it or not, I only have $1,000 left to go. In case you'd like to get me a few bucks closer, I'll put the link in the show notes. Thanks. Next time we'll be digging into 2 revisions of Robert C. Dennis and Earl Barrett's Phantom Pharaoh script after it had been renamed The Curse of Tut. Check out the thread in the All-Seeing, All-Knowing 66 Batman message board to read the script and post your comments on the script, or send them to batpulls at deconstructingcomics.com. Submit them within a week of the posting of this episode, and we may include them next time. Everyone keep your batarangs on target, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. To the Batpulls is a production of deconstructingcomics.com.